So we appreciate you being here to answer some questions. Before we say anything, before you do anything else, Co-Chair, do you have anything to say? We do need a motion to accept the minutes of the last meeting. So I have a motion. All those in favor? All right. Governor, I understand that you have an opening statement that you would like to make before we begin questioning. So you are recognized to make that opening statement.
Thank you, Senator Stubblefield, Representative Fite. Thank you for the invitation to speak on my decision to support the resettlement of a limited number of refugees from war-torn countries into our state. First, it is important to understand who qualifies as a refugee. A refugee is not someone who crosses our borders illegally or someone who enters our country and claims asylum. A refugee coming to America is not an illegal entry. A refugee often waits years to be authorized to come to the United States legally, and the refugee is vetted and has more security checks than any other type of immigrant who comes to the United States. The vetting process includes biographic and interagency security checks, Homeland Security interviews, fingerprint scans, and biometric security checks, and a medical exam. Once screened and selected, the refugee goes through a cultural education program by the United States. Now let me take you back in time. 4 years ago, information was floating around the state that thousands of Syrian refugees were coming to Arkansas. Despite the welcoming nature and compassion of Arkansans, I was concerned about security and the lack of information that was available to me as governor. I opposed a mass relocation of Syrian refugees because I did not have the information to give confidence to my decision. For these reasons, I issued a statement that I oppose the mass relocation of Syrian refugees to Arkansas. Some of you have asked, well, what has changed? The answer, a lot has changed. The Trump administration has made a number of changes. They have limited the number of refugees nationwide to 18,000, with likely fewer than 50 coming to Arkansas in 2020. Second, the priorities for refugee resettlement have changed, from focus on balancing geographic regions to placing a priority on those suffering religious persecution and those who have cooperated with the United States in the war against terrorism. The vetting and security checks have been dramatically increased, and very importantly, the state and local governments have been included on the decisions and have been provided essential information that was previously unavailable. As a result of these changes, I've been briefed on the security checks by my former colleagues at the Department of Homeland Security. I have closely examined the process both at the Department of State and with the sponsoring Arkansas Resettlement Agency. Based upon this due diligence, I have confidence in the high standard of security checks and that the incoming refugees will have the community support needed to get jobs, to pay taxes, and to be assimilated into our American culture and way of life. As a result, I communicated by letter to Secretary Pompeo Arkansas's willingness to accept refugees, and of course this took also the approval of Washington County, which I'll reference. My authorization is until December 31, 2020. My administration will continue to monitor the assimilation of the refugees, their employment, and their compliance with our laws. At the end of the year, I will advise the Department of State as to whether Arkansas will continue to participate in the program. I certainly hope that will be the case because the refugees settled to date have been successful. In fact, 98% of refugees become self-sufficient within 90 to 180 days of arrival. And so some of you have asked, well, who are they and where do they come from? The refugees in the resettlement program are fleeing persecution or other hardship in their home country. For many, such as Watada Mwenda and his family, leaving the Democratic Republic of Congo literally made the difference between life and death. In fact, before they fled, Mr. Mwanda's son and daughter-in-law were murdered, and he was kidnapped and held hostage until he escaped and sought refuge. Mr. Mwanda was settled in Fayetteville. Many of the refugees come from African nations that are embroiled in conflict or war. Some come from countries such as Iraq and Afghanistan, where they are at risk because they have cooperated with U.S. officials. Now let me introduce a special guest, Ms. Lucia Akili Mali. Ms. Lucia Akili Mali. Please stand if you would, please. She and her husband fled the Democratic Republic of Congo in 2000 because of the Civil War. They fled to Kenya, where they waited for the next 18 years to be resettled. But while they waited, they made a difference in the refugee camp. Lucia opened a small grocery store, and her husband, Kalula, planted a Baptist church. About 10 years into their time in Kenya, the Kenyan authorities reached out to them about fostering a pair of Congolese girls who had just arrived to the country unaccompanied. Their parents had been killed back in the DRC, the Congo, and they made their way to Kenya with a group of other refugees. Kalulu and Lucia agreed to take them in and adopt them as their own. They were all resettled in Arkansas in 2018 and have continued to work hard and have become a part of our community. Lucia has recently completed training as a certified nursing assistant and is working at a senior care facility. Her husband works for a manufacturing company in Springdale. Her oldest son attends NWAC, Northwest Arkansas Community College, and is hoping to transfer to the university next year to complete a bachelor degree in engineering. They are active members of Cross Church in Springdale. I also wanted to introduce two additional ones. Hamayun Abdullah from Afghanistan. Hamayun, would you stand, please? Thank you. He is here, and I asked him why he is here, why he became a refugee, and the answer was because he worked for years in Afghanistan with United States authorities, including the USAID. He was at risk, he went to a safe house, and he became a refugee to the United States of America. He lost his son because of his commitment to the United States of America. And then we have Manga Mukadama of the Congo. And Manga came here also from the Congo in a very similar story that you've heard previously. But I want to welcome them here to this distinguished committee, and I know that you'll want to welcome them as well. Let me also introduce Emily Crane Lynn, the Resettlement Director for Canopy of Northwest Arkansas. And Emily, I understand Canopy, for some of those who might not be familiar with it, is associated with Lutheran Immigration Services and has a relationship with Catholic Charities as well. In 2017, they helped relocate 52 to Arkansas. In 1857 and 1954. In fiscal year 20, 5 have been resettled thus far. Now, some have inquired about the cost to our state. The simple answer is that the refugees find employment, pay taxes, and the cost-benefit analysis is a net plus for our state. In fact, there's a physical cost analysis through the Trump administration that President Trump requested that demonstrated nationwide that there's a net positive impact of $16.9 billion as a result of refugees paying taxes, employment, and their work. The transition support for the 54 refugees who resettled last year in Arkansas came from the federal government and private donations. No state dollars are involved in the refugee support. Most of these refugees find a job within 3 months. After 90 days, they can apply for the same public assistance that is available to any other person who is here legally. But as I said, 98% transition off within 90 to 180 days. They also are subject to the same qualifications and requirements, including a work requirement when that is for a particular benefit. Under President Trump's executive order, it is necessary also to have local community support. I'm pleased to say that Judge Joseph Wood of Washington County, along with the mayors of Springdale and Fayetteville, have submitted letters indicating their support and willingness to accept the refugees as they have in the past. At this time, the relocation will only take place in Washington County. And before I turn it over to questions, let me conclude by saying America was founded by immigrants, and through the years they have fought to preserve our freedom and made the United States the greatest country on earth. Arkansas is a welcoming state. We have benefited from Vietnamese refugees who fled communism and a war-torn country. Wherever they come from, we benefit from their energy, devotion to freedom, and we want them to be a part of the fabric of our nation, our future, and our state. If we say no to them, then we lose the talent, entrepreneurship, and humanity of those who love America. Yes, they can go elsewhere, but Arkansas will benefit from their presence. Security is foremost, but I have confidence in the security measures taken by this administration. Let's welcome Lucia and others who come here for all that America has to offer.
Would you also agree that refugees allowed to enter the United States represent a cost not only to the U.S. government, which, a lot of times I've heard statements saying, well, these are federal funds. We have a tendency sometimes to distinguish between federal funds and state funds. All those funds are still taxpayer dollars. I mean, Washington money is Arkansas money, because without Arkansas taxpayer dollars, the federal government would not have the funds they have to do the programs and implement the programs they have. So those dollars really represent Arkansas taxpayer funds. And when you take into consideration the fact that, and I have a good friend who's, and you do too, you know this lady real well, Representative Kathy, former Representative Kathy Webb, who was head of the Arkansas Hunger Alliance. And when you consider the fact that Arkansas has 1 out of 4 children who go to bed hungry every night, and we are ranked as one of the top poor states in the country, can you understand the reaction that the public would have when they read about refugees being allowed to enter and the benefits that they are being given? They are also eligible for other assistance and services through Health and Human Services. In addition to that, they also are eligible for mainstream federal means tested public benefits, as well as assistance they might receive under state law, even assistance otherwise that's unavailable to our own citizens. And in my community, we have veterans who have fought for this country, for the freedoms that we enjoy in this country, who are going without needed assistance, and yet we take in individuals from other countries and provide them with financial assistance that we don't even give our own citizens. Can you understand that?
Well, Senator Stubblefield, first of all, I disagree with you. Started off the question by saying, is there a cost to us? And as President Trump initiated through an executive order early on, as he was considering the issue of refugees, he asked the State Department, Human Services, and other agencies to determine the net cost of refugees to the United States of America. And I'd be happy to share this with you, but the physical cost was analyzed with expenditures and revenues. And again, the conclusion of the Trump administration was that the refugees and their non-refugee spouses and children were a net physical benefit overall estimated at $16.9 billion. And so, yes, I believe that, again, to my statement, it's a positive thing that we bring immigrants to our country, that they benefit to us in terms of their work, their paying taxes. And the veterans that you mentioned, absolutely, they have the same access to benefits as any citizen would have or any legal resident of the United States. So it's a net plus for us. But the veterans, I think you talk to any veteran who served in Iraq or Afghanistan, and they would say, don't leave someone behind who cooperated and supported our United States military that's at risk.
From the Executive Order Section 2, it says that the consent must be in writing. The written consent must be released publicly. Further, the same section the consent must be given or the refugees cannot be placed at a location. So the executive order creates an opt-in situation instead of an opt-out, which means unless there is written consent from a location where the refugees could be resettled, they cannot locate there. So President Trump didn't just give this decision to the governor, he gave his decisions to the local governments as well, per that kind of conservative principle of the best kind of government is local government. We're seeing this in other states. In North Carolina, some cities and counties have accepted refugees. In Tennessee, roughly 1/3 of the 95 counties decided against accepting refugees, going so far as to pass a resolution where they said they would not accept refugees. I think that last part is important for people listening here and people who may be listening at home. You still have a decision to be made in this process. I know you said that the Washington County judge gave you a letter of consent. I have not seen that letter of consent. I don't know if anybody else has. Per the State Department's website, it's required that that consent be listed there. They have Arkansas's consent letters. They have other consent letters from cities and counties. They do not have any from Washington County, Springdale, or Fayetteville. But besides that, if you look at what the law actually says, the refugees can settle not just in Springdale and Fayetteville. Per the law, they can be within 100 miles of Fayetteville. Now, I did an informal map, and just looking at it, that looks like that's a dozen or more different counties. It goes all the way to Bull Shoals, Flippin, Mountain View, or Mountain Home, excuse me, Fort Smith, Clarksville, Russellville. If you look at it, it seems that we have to get acceptance from each one of these different county and locations. So here's my question. First, what is the letter of consent that we got from Washington County, Springdale, and Fayetteville? Secondly, what is your administration going to do to ensure that no refugees are placed in the counties that not either actively accept them or decide not to accept them? Because the people here still can call their local county officials and decide whether they want to make this decision or not. So what are the steps we are taking?
The letters from the Washington County judge, Joseph Woods, and the letters from the mayor of Springdale and the mayor of Fayetteville is a matter of record. It was sent to Secretary Pompeo. I'll be happy to furnish those to you. And so that means that they have communicated pursuant to the executive order that they're willing to accept the relocation of refugees. The Canopy, Northwest Arkansas, that's why they're there. They're working with those communities to relocate the refugees that are assigned by the Department of State. Now, that goes to those cities. That's as simple as it can get. Now, there is a freedom of movement in the United States of America. That's one of the great freedoms that we have. And so a refugee is here legally, and a refugee can decide that he's working for Walmart, and Walmart wants to transfer them to Michigan. They have the freedom to go to Michigan to work. And so there is freedom of movement. So the initial requirement is that the city that they're going to be initially relocated to has approved. And so, Senator Garner, in your area, there's not going to be initial relocation of refugees in your area or Senator Subtlefield's area. Now, they might go down there to Mount Magazine sometime because we have the freedom of movement in the United States of America. And, but they're going to be relocated to the cities that have signed off on their approval.
Well, I think that's the question, Governor. So it appears to me that unless a county government, and this is what it says on the Department of State's website, actively writes the consent, that they cannot be relocated there. So while you might have consent in Washington County, what everybody here needs to know is if you have an issue or you support it or don't support it, call your local county government, because unless they give that letter and it's posted on the Secretary of Department's website, I believe does not have the legal authority to resettle people there. You still have a decision in this process. Thank God President Trump gave us another checks and balance in order to make sure we do this properly. Thank you, Governor.
Yeah, and thank you, Senator. And please be assured that let's educate our communities. Yes, they have the right. If they want to pass a resolution, we don't want to accept refugees, they can do that. But it's a little bit irrelevant because the relocation intent is for Springdale, Washington County area. There's no intent to relocate any refugees in other parts of the state.
Speaking of assimilation and integration, Governor, one of my favorite shows when I was growing up as a kid was The Wizard of Oz. And I remember one of my favorite sayings in that movie was when Dorothy said, you know, Toto, I don't think we're in Kansas anymore. Every morning when I wake up and turn on the national news, sometimes I ask myself a question, am I still in the United States of America? Because I hear some of the craziest ideas, and I wonder where they're coming from. And the idea of assimilation, every refugee, whether it be a refugee or an immigrant coming into the United States, taking for granted the fact that you say they are assimilating, not all are assimilating. I don't think there's an individual sitting in this room today that doesn't agree with someone coming here through the legal process, and I understand the difference in refugees and illegal immigration. I don't think there's a person here who disagrees with the process of someone coming here legally through a process where they learn our language, they learn our customs, they learn that we are a constitutional republic, they learn that we have laws, and they do not come with the idea of setting up their own communities, establishing their own laws, their own culture, therefore vastly changing American culture. And I see that happening across the country to varying degrees, some in other parts more than here in the state of Arkansas. But I also see it in Northwest Arkansas. You have schools like in Springdale where they speak 46 different languages. You have schools that are stressed out in Northwest Arkansas. You have federal schools that I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, who have now made it a policy to not have anything that relates to Christmas. And also, they've disallowed any type of patriotic speeches or any patriotic material in the school. And I'm open, if someone could correct me, those things are not assimilating into our society as a constitutional republic country that was founded on Judeo-Christian principles. So that in itself troubles me a lot when it comes to, hey, could you please hold it down? Those things are troubling to me and a lot of the people that live within my Senate district and a lot of people in the state of Arkansas. Could you address that?
Well, we've had Italian immigrants come to the United States of America. In New York, they have the Italian district. In Arkansas, we have Town, and it is a source of cultural pride where the Zuppols and the Pinaldos, because those of a cultural heritage, they naturally like to live together and celebrate their Americanism, but also celebrate the fact that they are of Italian descent. You know, the Irish Americans love that culture, and so there's not anything unusual about having a cultural identity with where you came from, at the same time being as steadfast and loyal Americans as anyone that's been here since the Revolution. And it usually takes a generation. It takes time to assimilate and get over the language barriers. But that's what America has done successfully for 200 plus years. And, you know, just because we have challenges today doesn't mean we can't, we have to make sure that we have the right number. President Trump has made sure that instead of 100,000, it's down to 18,000 refugees. Can we successfully integrate 18,000 refugees in the United States of America? I think we can, and I think that's consistent with the greatest values of our country. Each of you are leaders in your community. You've got a choice to make. You can create fear or you can help resolve fear. I challenge you to help resolve fear, have the facts, and to talk about those. And I know that many of you are doing that. And, you know, I make tons of decisions every day affecting our state. I try to communicate as well as I can with the members of the General Assembly. I'll continue to try to do that. And Senator Rice, I want you all to have all the information that you need. Sometimes it's not a perfect system, but we try to communicate. This is an executive branch decision that I was called upon to make. I made that decision. I tried to communicate as much as we could. We'll always try to do it better. But Senator Stubblefield, you know, I'm a native Arkansan. I understand change, and I understand resistance to change. We're not changing the culture of Arkansas. We're just sharing the culture of Arkansas that those who also are troubled, coming from terrible circumstances, and I think we can embrace them.
All right, we have another question. Representative Whitaker, you have a question? Seat 23? 43. Okay, you're recognized. Representative Rye.
Thank you, Senator Stubblefield. Governor, good to see you this morning, and glad you came, because actually we have had a lot of calls statewide pertaining to this, and I think that you're answering a lot of questions that we needed to know. But let me ask just one question, sir. From the history in the beginning of this program, have you ever had any record of any terrorists that have come from this?
No.